November 13th, 1943. USS Essex, Philippines Sea. 3:47 in the morning. A plane mechanic named James Swett watches another F6F Hellcat fighter plane flip off the carrier deck and crash into the dark Pacific Ocean waters. That's the third pilot who died this week. Not because of Japanese Zero planes, not because of enemy guns shooting at them, because their own fuel tanks blew up during night landings on the carrier. The numbers are terrible. Since October, Task Force 38 has lost 47 Hellcat pilots because fuel vapor exploded during carrier landings. The special fuel tanks designed to keep pilots safe from enemy bullets are killing them instead. Every hard landing, every time the hook catches the wire, sends a shock wave through the fuel system. The vapor catches fire. The cockpit becomes a fireball before the pilot can even unbuckle his harness. Admiral Mark Mitcher has stopped all-night flying. Without night fighter planes, the carrier group can't see anything after sunset. Japanese bomber planes are using this weakness against them. Last week, the USS Independence got hit by 2 torpedoes during a midnight attack. 73 sailors died. The ship barely made it back to Pearl Harbor. The Navy's airplane department has been working on the problem for 8 months. Their solution: make the tank-holding part stronger, add springs to absorb shock, change the cap that releases pressure. It doesn't work. Pilots keep dying. The fuel tanks keep exploding. What the admirals don't know, what nobody knows, is that a 24-year-old mechanic from Terrute, Indiana, has been doing secret experiments in Hangar Bay 3. James Swett never finished high school. He doesn't have an engineering degree, no special training in how fuel systems work. He's not supposed to be thinking about solutions. He's supposed to be following orders, fixing things with tools, keeping quiet. But Swett has been watching the crash investigations. He's been studying the burn marks. And he's noticed something the engineers missed. Something so obvious, so simple that when he finally explains it to the leaders, they'll accuse him of sabotage. They'll threaten him with military court. They'll tell him his idea breaks 3 different Navy rules and could get him 20 years in prison. 3 hours from now, Swett is going to steal a Hellcat off the flight deck. He's going to fly an unauthorized test mission in the middle of a war zone. And he's going to prove that everything the Navy knows about fuel tank safety is wrong. The F6F Hellcat started being used in January 1943 with an amazing promise. It would be the first carrier fighter that could survive combat damage and bring pilots home alive. The secret was the self-sealing fuel tank. When a bullet went through the tank, a special rubber lining would automatically seal the hole. The Japanese Zero had no protection like this. One burst from Hellcat's guns would turn a Zero into a fireball. American pilots would walk away from damage that killed their enemies. By summer 1943, the Hellcat was winning in Pacific battles. Kill numbers reached 19-1. Pilots loved the plane. It was fast, heavily armed, and almost impossible to destroy in dogfights. The Navy ordered 5,000 more. Then the night flying began. Carrier landings have always been dangerous. Pilots call it a controlled crash, slamming a 20,000-pound plane onto a moving deck at 90 knots, hoping the wire catches your tail hook. During daytime flying, pilots can see the landing signal officer, judge their approach angle, adjust for the carrier's movement. At night, they're landing blind, guided only by a few dim lights and radio calls. The first fuel tank explosion happened on October 3rd, 1943. Lieutenant Robert Anderson made a perfect night landing on the USS Lexington. His tail hook caught the number 3 wire. The sudden stop sent a pressure wave through his fuel tanks. The vapor caught fire. Anderson died before the fire crew could reach him. The Navy blamed pilot error. Anderson must have come in too fast, hit too hard. They ordered pilots to make gentler approaches. October 14th, 1943. Ensign Charles Murphy dies in the same kind of explosion on the USS Bunker Hill. Murphy's approach was perfect. His landing speed was exactly by the book. October 22nd. Lieutenant James Fleming, USS Enterprise. Same explosion, same result. October 29th. 2 pilots in one night. USS Essex and USS Yorktown. The airplane department calls an emergency investigation. Their engineers identify the problem. The wire stopping the plane creates a hydraulic hammer effect inside the fuel tanks. The liquid fuel slams forward, then bounces backward. This creates a pressure spike that breaks the self-sealing rubber lining. Fuel vapor escapes into the tank's airspace. Any spark from static electricity, from metal touching metal, from the electrical system lights it on fire. The department's solution seems logical. Make everything stronger. Add stronger parts to keep the tanks from moving. Put in springs to absorb the shock. Change the pressure release valves to let vapor out more quickly. They fixed 200 planes with a new system. November 6, 1943. The first plane with the new changes explodes during landing. Lieutenant Richard Best dies instantly. The admirals are desperate. Admiral Mitcher stops all-night fighter flying for good. Without night air cover, the carrier groups are in danger. Japanese submarines have already sunk 2 destroyers. Bomber planes attack freely after dark. Intelligence reports show the Japanese are gathering their submarine fleet for a planned night attack on the carrier groups. The Navy's top fuel system engineers, men with degrees from MIT and Caltech, are stuck. They've tried everything. Stronger tanks, better air release, shock absorption. Nothing works. Everyone agrees. Self-sealing fuel tanks and carrier night flying don't work together. The Navy will have to choose one or the other. In Hangar Bay 3 of the USS Essex, plane mechanic James Swett doesn't believe it. He's been watching the investigations. He's been studying the wreckage, and he thinks everyone is looking in the wrong place. James Swett grew up fixing tractors on his family's Indiana farm during the Great Depression. He never finished high school, had to leave at 16 when his father died, leaving him to support his mother and 3 younger sisters. He worked at a Terra Haute auto repair shop, became known locally as the kid who could fix anything. When Pearl Harbor was bombed, Swett joined the Navy the next day. The Navy didn't want him as a pilot. No high school diploma meant no officer training. They made him a mechanic instead. Swett didn't complain. He loved working on planes. The F6F Hellcat was the most complicated machine he'd ever touched. 9 cylinders, 2,000 horsepower, hydraulics, electrical systems, weapons. He studied every manual he could find. He volunteered for every training class. Within 6 months, he could take apart and put back together a Hellcat engine blindfolded. But Swett wasn't just fixing things with tools. He watched how things failed. When other mechanics saw a broken part, Swett saw a pattern. When engineers suggested solutions, Swett mentally tested them against what he'd seen in the field. The night of November 12, 1943, Swett is assigned to crash investigation duty. Lieutenant William Edwards has just died in another fuel tank explosion. Swett examines the wreckage in the hangar bay. The fuel tanks are broken exactly like all the others. The holding parts, made stronger with the Navy's new changes, are fine. The springs are undamaged. The pressure release valves worked perfectly. Swett stares at the blackened tanks for 3 hours. Then he notices something. The explosion started at the top of the tank, not the bottom. The burn patterns show the fire spread downward, but fuel is heavier than air. It collects at the bottom of the tank. If the hydraulic hammer effect was sloshing fuel forward and creating vapor, the explosion should start at the bottom where fuel and air mix. Unless the problem isn't the fuel at all. Swett grabs a flashlight and crawls inside the wreckage. He examines the tank's interior. The self-sealing rubber lining is fine at the bottom, but at the top, near the filler cap, the rubber is shredded. Not burned, shredded, torn apart by mechanical force before the fire started. Swett realizes what's happening. The engineers are solving the wrong problem. The hydraulic hammer isn't creating dangerous vapor by sloshing liquid fuel. It's creating a vacuum. When the plane stops violently, the fuel slams forward, leaving an empty space at the back of the tank. Nature hates a vacuum. Air rushes in through the filler cap to fill the empty space. But the self-sealing rubber lining, designed to be flexible, gets sucked inward by the vacuum. It tears, and when it tears, it creates static electricity. That spark lights the fuel vapor that's always in any partly filled tank. The Navy's solution, making the tank stronger, makes the problem worse. Stronger tanks mean more violent vacuum effects. Better pressure release valves let vapor out faster, creating stronger vacuums. Swett knows how to fix it, but nobody's going to listen to a mechanic without a high school diploma. November 13th, 1943. Hangar Bay 3. Swett can't sleep. He keeps seeing Lieutenant Edwards burning alive in his cockpit. He thinks about the solution. It's so simple, so obvious. Fill the empty space in the fuel tank with something that stops vacuum from forming. Something that won't burn, something that expands and shrinks with the fuel level. Foam rubber. If you line the inside of the tank with open-cell foam rubber, it will soak up fuel like a sponge when the tank is full. As fuel burns off during flight, the foam releases it gradually. But most importantly, the foam fills the empty space. No empty space means no vacuum. No vacuum means no tearing of the self-sealing liner. No tearing means no static spark. The foam would add maybe 5 pounds to each tank. It wouldn't affect performance. It wouldn't need any big changes. You could add it in an hour. Swett finds Chief Petty Officer Michael Torres in the maintenance office. Torres has been a naval flyer for 15 years. He trusts Swett's instincts. Chief, I need foam rubber about 6 cubic feet, and I need access to a Hellcat's fuel system. Torres looks at him. What for? I know why the tanks are exploding, and I know how to fix it. The airplane department has 50 engineers working on this. They're looking in the wrong place. Torres thinks about this. He's seen Swett solve problems before. Show me. They work through the night in a corner of the hangar bay. Swett explains the vacuum theory. He shows Torres the burn patterns from the crash investigations. He shows with a bucket of water and a rubber sheet how the vacuum tears the lining. Torres is convinced. We need to test this. I need a Hellcat, and I need to do a full throttle stop landing test. That's impossible. We can't just take a plane without permission. Then we get permission from who? The air boss, the captain. They'll laugh us out of the room. You're a mechanic. You're not even an engineer. Swett knows Torres is right. The Navy has a strict system. Ideas come down from the top, not up from the bottom. A mechanic doesn't tell admirals how to design fuel systems. What if we just do it? Swett says quietly. Do what? Take a Hellcat tonight. Install the foam. Run a test landing. If it works, we have proof. If it doesn't, I'll take the court-martial. Torres stares at him. That is absolutely illegal. You'd be stealing a Navy plane. That's 20 years in prison. Maybe a firing squad. How many more pilots are going to die while we wait for permission? Torres thinks about Lieutenant Edwards, about the 73 sailors who died on the Independence, about the Japanese submarines circling the carrier group waiting for darkness. I'll get the foam rubber, Torres says. You get the Hellcat ready. We test at dawn. November 13th, 1943. Swett and Torres work fast in the pre-dawn darkness. They've picked Hellcat number 42, a backup plane that's not scheduled for morning flying. Using mattress foam from the ship supplies, cut into strips and soaked in fire retardant, they line the inside of both fuel tanks. The installation takes 40 minutes. They don't have time for ground tests. They don't have time for math. They barely have time to close the access panels before the morning flight operations begin. I'll fly it, Torres says. No, my idea, my responsibility. You're not a pilot. I've got 30 hours in the co-pilot seat. I know how to land this thing. Torres knows this is crazy, but they're out of time. Make it quick. One landing, then we bring this to the commander. Swett climbs into the cockpit. The flight deck crew is getting ready for morning operations. In the chaos of planes moving around, one more Hellcat moving to the catapult doesn't get attention. Swett's heart is pounding. He's never launched from a carrier before, never landed on one. He's about to try the most dangerous move in naval flying with an unauthorized fuel system change. The catapult officer waves him forward. Swett moves to the catapult. The launch crew hooks the holdback. Swett runs through the checklist from memory. Flaps down. Mixture rich. Prop full forward. Canopy locked. The catapult fires. The speed slams Swett back in his seat. 3 seconds later, he's airborne, climbing away from the Essex at 200 knots. For 10 minutes, Swett circles the carrier group. He burns off fuel, getting the tanks down a half full, the same level that caused the explosions. His hands are shaking. He's broken about 6 military rules in the last hour. If this doesn't work, his Navy career is over. He lines up for landing approach. The landing signal officer guides him in. Swett cuts power, drops flaps, adjusts his angle. The carrier deck rushes up. His wheels slam down. His tail hook catches the number 2 wire. The stop is violent. 0 to 90 knots in 2 seconds. Swett feels the fuel surge forward in the tanks. He waits for the explosion. Nothing happens. He's alive. The tanks are fine. The foam worked. Swett moves to the parking area and shuts down the engine. As he climbs out of the cockpit, he sees Commander David McCampbell, the Air Group commander, walking across the flight deck with 6 officers behind him. McCampbell's face is red with anger. What the hell do you think you're doing? The confrontation happens right there on the flight deck, with 200 sailors watching. Sir, I can explain. Explain. You stole a Navy plane. You did an unauthorized flight. You endangered this entire carrier group. Torres steps forward. Sir, if you'll just listen, I'll have you both in the brig within the hour. The area erupts. Other officers are shouting. The deck crew has stopped working to watch. Someone yells for the police. Swett tries to explain about the foam, about the vacuum theory, but McCampbell won't listen. Then Captain Raoul Waller, the Essex's commanding officer, arrives on the flight deck. Commander McCampbell, what's the situation? McCampbell explains, unauthorized flight, stolen plane, breaking about 40 Navy rules. Waller turns to Swett. Why? Swett explains everything. The vacuum theory, the torn rubber linings, the foam solution, the successful test landing he just completed. The flight deck goes silent. Waller looks at the Hellcat. You changed the fuel tanks. Yes, sir. Without permission. Yes, sir. And you just completed a full throttle stopped landing with half full tanks. Yes, sir. Waller walks to the Hellcat. He examines the fuel tank access panels. He calls over the ship's engineering officer. They look at the foam installation. 5 minutes later, Waller turns back to Swett. Mechanic Swett, you're either going to prison or you're going to save this fleet. We're going to find out which. Commander McCampbell, stop all flight operations. Give me the airplane department on the radio and give me 10 more Hellcats ready for changes. If you're interested in stories of ordinary people who changed history through courage and smarts, consider subscribing. We bring you the untold stories of heroes who refuse to accept the impossible. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss an episode. The airplane department responds within hours. Captain Raoul Waller's message, mechanic may have solved fuel tank explosion problem, reaches Admiral John McCain, commander of Task Force 38. McCain orders immediate testing. November 14th, 1943, USS Essex does controlled experiments. 6 Hellcats are changed with foam-lined fuel tanks. 6 control planes keep standard tanks. Each plane does 10 stop landings at different fuel levels, different approach speeds, different sea conditions. The test pilots push the limits. Hard landings, off-center catches, maximum stop. The results are clear. 0 explosions in the foam-lined planes, 2 explosions in the control group, but the Navy leaders remain doubtful. Rear Admiral Frederick Sherman, head of carrier flying development, flies out to the Essex personally to question Swett. You're telling me that 50 engineers from MIT missed something a farm boy from Indiana figured out? I'm not an engineer, sir. Maybe that's why I saw it. I wasn't looking at math. I was looking at wreckage. Sherman looks at the test data. He interviews the test pilots. He checks the foam installation. Finally, he asks the question that matters. What's the impact on operations? Weight, performance, maintenance. Swett has the answers ready. 5 pounds per tank. Almost nothing. No performance problems in flight tests. Installation time, 45 minutes per plane. Cost $8 in materials. Sherman makes his decision. We're doing this fleet-wide. Every Hellcat in the Pacific gets the change within 2 weeks. But there's a problem. The Navy doesn't have enough foam rubber. The material is in short supply. Most of it goes to life jackets and floating gear. Sherman orders every pound of suitable foam in the Pacific theater. It's not enough. Then someone suggests mattresses. Every ship has hundreds of mattresses. The foam inside them, if treated with fire retardant, could work. Within 72 hours, sailors across the Pacific Fleet are cutting up mattresses. They're sleeping on bare springs while their mattress foam saves pilots' lives. Nobody complains. Everyone knows someone who died in a fuel tank explosion. The change program becomes the fastest plane fix in Navy history. By November 30th, 1943, over 800 Hellcats have foam-lined fuel tanks. Admiral Mitcher lifts the night flying ban. December 4th, 1943. The first combat test. Task Force 38 is working near the Gilbert Islands. Japanese intelligence has found the carrier group. At 8:30 at night, radar picks up incoming planes. 12 Mitsubishi G-4M Betty torpedo bombers approaching from the northwest. 4 foam change Hellcats launch for night intercept. The pilots, Lieutenant Commander Edward O'Hare, Lieutenant Alex Varatsu, Ensign Warren Scone, and Ensign John Ballantyne. O'Hare leads the formation through pitch-black sky. They're flying without lights, guided only by radar directions from the Essex. The Japanese bombers are approaching at wave-top level, trying to avoid radar detection. At 2:47, O'Hare spots the first Betty, a dark shape against darker water. He dives, opens fire at 300 yards. His tracers walk across the bomber's body. The Betty explodes, flips into the ocean. Varatsu gets the second bomber. Scone gets the third. The night sky erupts with tracers and explosions. The Japanese formation breaks apart, but O'Hare's Hellcat takes damage. A Betty's tail gunner scores hits on his left wing and fuel tank. Fuel streams from the hole in the tank. The self-sealing lining does its job. The leak slows, then stops. But O'Hare has lost 50 gallons. He's running on fumes. He heads back to the Essex. The carrier is moving up and down in heavy seas. O'Hare makes his approach, fighting crosswinds and low fuel. His wheels slam down. His tail hook catches the wire. The violent stop sends a shockwave through his half-empty fuel tanks. Before Swett's change, O'Hare would have died instantly. His tanks would have exploded just like Lieutenant Anderson, just like Lieutenant Edwards. Instead, O'Hare walks away without a scratch. The foam absorbed the shock. No vacuum formed. No rubber tore. No spark caught fire. The combat results speak for themselves. In December 1943, night fighter-equipped carrier groups shoot down 47 Japanese planes with 0 losses to fuel tank explosions. In January 1944, that number rises to 63 Japanese planes destroyed. The Japanese notice capture documents show their confusion. Their intelligence reports describe American night fighters as impossible to damage in combat and capable of flying without breaking down. Japanese pilots begin avoiding night attacks on carrier groups completely. The big picture impact is huge. Without the threat of night torpedo attacks, American carrier groups can fly more boldly. They can close to within striking range of Japanese-held islands. They can stay in position during multi-day operations without running to safe waters after sunset. The kill numbers tell the story. Before foam-lined tanks, 19-1 in favor of American pilots during day flying, but night flying stopped because of explosion risk. After foam-lined tanks, 23-1 during day flying, 31-1 during night flying. Japanese losses jump up. American losses go way down. By February 1944, the change is standard on all Navy carrier planes, not just Hellcats, but Corsairs, Avengers, and Hell Divers too. The foam lining method is used for bomber fuel tanks, then for transport planes. A German Luftwaffe intelligence report captured after the war describes the American innovation. The enemy has developed a fuel tank system that makes their planes almost impossible to explode during carrier operations. Our own attempts to copy this system have failed. The American technical advantage and safety measures represents a big problem for our forces. In March 1944, Lieutenant Alex Varatsu, one of the pilots from that first night combat mission, tracks down Swett in the Essex maintenance bay. Varatsu has just become an ace with 19 confirmed kills. "I heard you're the guy who fixed the fuel tanks," Varatsu says. Swett nods. "I took damage last week. Fuel tank hit. Made it back to the carrier on fumes. Slammed down hard on the deck. Walked away clean." Varatsu extends his hand. "Because of you, I'm alive. Because of you, a lot of guys are alive." Swett shakes his hand. He doesn't know what to say. "How many pilots do you think you've saved?" Varatsu asks. Swett has never counted it. He was just trying to fix a problem. The story of James Swett reminds us that new ideas often come from unexpected places, from people who see problems differently because they're not limited by normal thinking. If you want to hear more stories like this, stories about ordinary people who changed the course of history, please like this video and share it with someone who likes real heroes. Your support helps us continue bringing these forgotten stories to light. Between November 1943 and August 1945, foam-lined fuel tanks stopped an estimated 394 fuel tank explosions in carrier planes. That's 394 pilots who came home alive. 394 families who weren't told their son died. 394 men who went on to fly more missions, shoot down more enemy planes, support more ground operations. The Navy made 12,275 F6F Hellcats during World War II. Every single one built after December 1943 had foam-lined fuel tanks based on Swett's design. The change was also done in 10,000 F4U Corsairs, 9,839 TBF Avengers, and 7,040 SB-2C Hell Divers. Total planes protected 39,154. But James Swett never got public recognition during the war. The Navy labeled the foam lining method as secret, fearing that if the Japanese understood the system, they might develop ways around it. Swett's name appears nowhere in official histories published before 1990. He was promoted to Chief Petty Officer in January 1944. He served on the Essex until the war ended, fixing planes, training new mechanics, and quietly making improvements that saved lives. When other sailors asked him about his role in the fuel tank solution, he gave credit away. A lot of people figured it out. He'd say, "I just got lucky." After the war, Swett returned to Terrat. He opened a small auto repair shop. He married his high school sweetheart, Mary Catherine Sullivan. They raised 4 children. He never talked about his Navy service. His children didn't know about his role in saving hundreds of pilots until a Navy historian tracked him down in 1991. The foam-lined fuel tank idea Swett started is still used today. Modern planes, military and civilian, use foam baffles and fuel tanks to stop explosion during crashes. The Federal Aviation Administration requires foam-based explosion stopping systems in commercial plane fuel tanks. Formula One race cars use similar technology. Every time you board an airliner, you're protected by a safety system that goes back to a 24-year-old mechanic who refused to accept that good men had to die. In 1993, the Navy gave Swett the Legion of Merit 48 years late. The paper reads, "For exceptionally good conduct in the performance of outstanding services and achievements whose new idea in fuel system safety directly resulted in saving hundreds of lives and contributed greatly to the success of Navy flying operations in the Pacific Theater." Swett went to the ceremony at the Pentagon. He was 74 years old. When reporters asked him how it felt to finally get recognition, he said, "I was just doing my job. The real heroes are the pilots who flew those missions. I just made sure they could come home." James Swett died in 2009 at age 90. His death notice in the Terrat Tribune-Star mentioned his Navy service in the final paragraph. Most readers had no idea the quiet mechanic who'd fixed their cars for 50 years had saved hundreds of lives. The lesson of James Swett's story isn't about genius or papers or formal education. It's about seeing problems clearly, having the courage to act, and understanding that sometimes the most important new ideas come from people who aren't supposed to have the answers, but who refuse to accept that the answers don't exist. Sometimes the person who changes everything is the person nobody expected. Sometimes the solution is simple, and sometimes breaking the rules is the only way to save lives.